This is Supervisor Ed Romaine, and you're watching Government at Work on Channel 18.
Start off this briefing, which is a little bit different than a press conference, because what we're going to do is present the facts as we have come to determine them at this point about what happened on Oldfield Road with the collapsed deck. There's a lot of other related facts. Apparently, according to neighbors and other people, there were several students there. Some people said that number ranged well above 200 and maybe as much as 400. I don't have direct knowledge of that, and I'll allow people to speak about this. We obviously have a grave concern about this. We have a concern of a number of illegal rooming homes being created from single-family homes where someone will come in, and I will say unscrupulous landlord because there's no other term I could use to think of that, who has set out for profit's sake to ignore the laws of the town of Brookhaven and the safety codes that are built into our building codes, which is the state building code. These are people that go in and carve up a single-family home into multiple bedrooms, taking rooms like living rooms or dining rooms that were not meant to serve as bedrooms and carving them up as bedrooms, making those changes without a building permit, not seeking a rental permit from the town in most cases, and obviously not getting a certificate of occupancy. These type of changes make it very difficult for fire departments responding or emergency ambulances responding, particularly in case of a fire. That is a difficulty. We have worked to crack down on these type of homes, and we'll continue to do that. We are absolutely committed, because what happens oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, when people carve up these homes illegally into illegal rooming houses, often we find that these landlords do not maintain these homes as the surrounding neighbors do. That creates problems because it affects the property values of everyone in the community. And we are about protecting property values when particularly code violations like this happen. Occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally, people that rent these homes will have student parties in which there's a lot of people that congregate on that street in terms of cars and parking and traffic and late hours. That happens occasionally. It does not happen in every such rental house, and I want to make that clear. That is an issue for the police to deal with. Now, the police are not represented here today, but I will tell you, as you know, in this state, drinking under the age of 21 is illegal. No one, to my knowledge, and I don't have that complete report on this, and let me be very honest, has been arrested for underage drinking, despite the fact of one student, from what I'm being told, being hospitalized. However, 3 people have been ticketed under the social host law in the county, where if you host a party of this nature and bad things happen as a result of that, you can get ticketed. They have been ticketed. They'll have their day in court. I think their names have been forwarded to the university. So as we start this briefing, I'm going to ask the councilwoman from the area, Valerie Cartwright, if she has a few words that she'd like to say.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. Of course, I echo many of the sentiments that you've already stated. The deck collapse that occurred this past weekend is a prime example of the serious safety hazards that exist when our governmental codes, and we're talking about on all levels, all codes and our laws are violated. The numerous violations at this location jeopardize the health, the safety, and the wellness of the home occupants, as well as the visitors to the home on that evening. Illegal, overcrowded homes and boarding houses will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law because they are dangerous, clearly, based on what's happened most recently, and they have an extremely negative impact on the surrounding communities. Over the past few years, my colleagues on the town board and I have remained committed to fighting for the quality of life of the constituents in our communities. We'll continue to crack down on everyone who violates our laws. Enforcement is one of our priorities, and the town continues to increase our enforcement tools to our investigators. As to this most recent incident, the law department, which I'm sure will speak in a few moments, will continue to deal with the owner during the court proceedings, and we're just thankful that the injuries were not worse this past weekend, and hope that the repercussion that falls upon those that violated our law will be a deterrent to future violators in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a briefing, so we're going to ask our two fire marshals to come up first, then our building inspector and Dave Moran from our town attorney's office. At the end of their briefing, we will ask the university officials to present their information as well. And at the end of that, if there's questions, we'll be happy to entertain questions. But I think the briefing is the best way to go about this. And I'll start with, by the way, our Chief Fire Marshal and his office did a splendid job. I have nothing but praise for the fire marshals of this town. They not only did this, but just recently there was a huge gas issue down in the Mastic Beach area. They responded. I have nothing but praise for their efforts and work. So, please,
Thank you, Mr.
Chris.
Supervisor. Good morning. My name is Chris Merman. I'm the Chief Fire Marshal of the town of Brookhaven. I'm just going to make a brief statement, and as Supervisor alluded to, there'll be time for questions afterwards. On the evening of Friday, the 26th of August, at approximately 11:07 p.m., the Setauket Fire Department responded to a report of a deck collapse at 15 Oldfield Road in East Setauket. The initial report upon dispatch that there were approximately 50 people on a deck where the deck had collapsed. The Setauket Fire Department responded appropriately with the personnel and equipment appropriate for this type of incident. At that time, a town fire marshal was requested to respond to the scene, as we often do, to assist the fire departments in anything that they may require. Upon the fire marshal's arrival, he was advised that there was approximately 400 people taking part in a party at the residence. An elevated deck, which was approximately 10 feet high, had collapsed, which at the time of the collapse, it was reported that there were about 50 people on the deck. 2 people were transported with non-life-threatening injuries to University Hospital. A 3rd person was transported for illness not related to the deck collapse. The fire marshal did examine the deck and did determine the failure to occur at the connection point of the deck framing members to the house. And I will ask the Chief Building Inspector to comment on that later. Per our protocol, a law investigator from the town's law department was requested to the scene. Both the fire marshal and the law investigator did conduct a life safety inspection of the home with the homeowner and the residents. They were accompanied by them, and cited a number of life safety and other violations. And the deputy town attorney will be speaking on that. That's pretty much all I have right now. Senior Fire Marshal Mike Mateo was on scene, and he'll be available for any questions should any come up.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would ask our Chief Building Inspector and our Deputy Town Attorney to come on up. And
thank you. I'm Arthur Garehauser, Chief Building Inspector. I just had some comments on background for you. The home and the deck were constructed in 1973. They both benefited from a certificate of occupancy, and the deck was constructed in compliance with the code in effect at the time. All right, and as the Chief Fire Marshal mentioned, the failure was at the ledger board, the connection of that ledger board to the house.
David J. Moran, Deputy Town Attorney. By way of background, I just want everyone to be aware of the circumstances that we face every day in the Stony Brook area, specifically in and around the university, because of the time frames and the schedules. We had this defendant in court back in March, and the case at that time ended in May, right about the time as the semester ended. We did our inspections. House was vacant, in compliance at that time. Summer happens, fall semester starts, and next thing you know, we have a situation that has occurred. I commend the supervisor and the town board for continuing to give the law department the resources necessary to keep this fight happening because this is the pattern. We work our tails off. My law department investigators are in the area 24/7 pretty much. Weekends, holidays, doesn't matter. That phone rings, we're out there. And we can't be out there without the support of the town board and the supervisor's office. We've developed relationships with the university, sharing information that has helped in combating these situations where we do come across illegal or non-compliant structures and rentals. We forward that information to the university. If they're advertising it at that point, for whatever reason, this share of information leads to that listing being removed and a concentration on that property specifically by both the university and Brookhaven Town. So in this situation, we had this defendant in court back in May. He did plead guilty. Before pleading guilty, we did an inspection and assured the property was in compliance. And quite honestly, this defendant sold us a bill of goods. I'm selling my house, I'm going to move into this one, blah, blah, blah. Long and the short of it, he had no intention of doing that. We've now have sought and found other properties which he owns, which we are working and bringing those into compliance now. We have to, in these prosecutions, get their full attention. This can no longer be a cost of doing business, a plea of guilty in May and filling the house back up in September or late August. We've been very successful in breaking that business model, and we will continue to do so. The current violations are significant. The current violations put the tenants in jeopardy, the current violations put the occupants in jeopardy, and the current violations put the neighboring community in jeopardy. It puts our first responders in jeopardy. It puts our staff in jeopardy who have to go and do these inspections. It is very dangerous. I commend my staff as well as the fire marshal's office for their prompt attention in this matter. Bringing the defendant, we will bring the defendant to justice, not just at this property, in his own residence and another property that he owns in the Rocky Point area. And again, we'll be available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Listed here is some of the appearance tickets that were issued. Obviously, there was no working smoke detectors. There was no carbon monoxide detectors. They were running the room as running the house as a rooming house, not as a single family for which it is zoned for. There were broken window in the basement. There was no CO, certificate of occupancy, to convert any of the rooms, and there was locked doors, interior locked doors, which is a violation. Let me now call up the university, which is here, to talk about their role. We have Tim Eklund, who is the Dean of Students. Tim, come on up. We have Joan Dickerson, who we've dealt with many, many times, the Director of Community Relations. Joan, come on up. Come on up. I mean, if anyone have questions at the end. And Mike Aarons, who has done an excellent job as their Assistant Vice President for Community Relations. And I don't know which one of you gentlemen, lady, is going to speak. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you particularly, Ed and Valerie, for the work that you have done in looking into these issues along with us. And we're very pleased with the kind of relationship that we continue to have as we look at housing off campus. And I also want to thank the fire departments, the Suffolk County Police for their response, the EMTs that responded to the situation. Indeed, we are grateful that this situation was not worse than what it was, and it is something that we're very concerned about in looking at how our students are living off campus. We're an institution, a university of 25,000 students. 10,000 of those students live on campus. We have the largest housing operation in all of SUNY, and we're one of the highest housing operations in the Northeast. So we do have a good share of our students who live on campus, but as a large university, many of our students live at home, live with their parents, live with their families, but some of them want to live in the community, and this is a wonderful community to live in. And it's really incumbent upon all of us to ensure that they find safe legal housing to live in. And since I started at the university 2 years ago, I've been meeting along with our governmental relations folks with the town of Brookhaven and talking about, how can we together work to do this. And we really appreciate, Dave, your efforts in trying to root out these illegal housing areas and working to with your enforcement folks to enforce the town ordinances that apply to housing and to work towards this outcome of making sure that we have safe housing for our students. We want our students to be able to live in the community, be good citizens and good neighbors, and we want to continue to work with the town of Brookhaven to make sure that that happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That ends the briefing. If you have specific questions for anyone that has spoken regarding the information that they have presented, I also want to point out we have two of our investigators here today. They do a wonderful job, and we depend on them. They're our eyes and ears in the community to make sure that our codes are enforced. And our only purpose is enforcing our code to make sure that communities are safe and that they are compliant with the building and zoning codes of this town. So with that, let me open it up for anyone that had any questions. Carl is from Newsday. Our local reporter does a great job.
This is question for David. Can you identify the landlord, and going back to the May case, what did he plead guilty to? Did he pay a fine, or what other kind of punishment was there?
The landlord, it's probably simpler for me to spell the name, Aydinli. Aydinli, last name Zeyit. There was a guilty plea entered back in May. There was a fine levied. Unfortunately, under the criminal procedural law, those were pleas to violations. Those violations are sealed as it relates to the prosecutors. That information is available at the 6th District Court. But there was a fine levied, and like I said, before that fine was levied, we did inspections. Investigator Passion did inspections at the premises to ensure at that moment in time the property was in compliance prior to the guilty plea.
Is there a court date yet for the new charges?
October 27th.
And that's what, 6th District Court?
Correct, sir. It's 150 West Main Street in Patchogue.
So if I understand everything that's been said, there is nothing per se illegal about the deck itself because it was in compliance when it was built?
Correct.
It was otherwise structurally sound, just not for 50 people?
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I believe it was structurally sound, but you put too much weight on any deck, no matter how structurally sound it is, particularly a deck that was, what, 43 years old?
43 years.
43 years old, you put 50 people on a deck that was meant to hold maybe 10 or 12 people. That's part of the problem. So what you had is you did not have people at that party exercising careful judgment. Because careful judgment would tell you, this is a deck that's 43 years old, this is a deck that can hold maybe 10 or 12 people. When you put 50 people and you overload a deck, you are stressing it out. And that was, in essence, the problem.
I would add that the codes have changed. I said it was in compliance with the code in effect at the time. The current code would no longer allow that type of connection. You would have to have lag bolts connecting the legible board to the house so that it resists the lateral pull. The nailing gives you shear, but not the lateral movement.
Yes.
I have a question for Tim from
Tim?
Okay. Hi, I'm Jill Ryan. I'm a reporter from the Stony Brook University Statesman, and I know that the Dean of Students Office was calling around students who they heard were hurt and were probably hospitalized. Is there a way you can give me a number as to how many people the office has been calling?
Well, we called all the students who we were notified were hospitalized, and I think you heard from the fire department the number of students that were taken to the hospital?
Yes, but the number of students taken to the hospital was 2, and the number of students actually at the hospital was probably more. There were people who did take Ubers to the hospital who did have like minor injuries, and those who walked home, and some of them went later. So
Yeah, the only students that we're aware of that were injured were those that we learned that were transported to the hospital
okay.
from the scene.
Okay.
I have a question for you too.
Okay.
Has the university taken any action so far in direct response to this incident?
As of right now, what we're doing is still gathering information, looking to what the facts were around the circumstance, and then we'll evaluate that and determine what action is necessary, if any, at that point.
Tim, given that this was off-campus housing, can the college do anything to discipline any students that might be at fault here?
Yeah, any of the situations that we have that happen off campus, we have to look at our student code and see how it might apply to what has occurred off campus. But they are our students, so we need to make sure that if there are code violations that have occurred, that we will take the appropriate action.
Yes.
You were at the house?
I was.
Could you describe?
The white
Mike's trouble.
Thank you. Could you describe a little bit about like what you saw when you got there? Were there people just kind of everywhere? Were they just?
As I was arriving, I was driving down Oldfield Road. There was approximately 150 students, well, I'm assuming were students, estimated age between 18 and 25, walking towards me as I was heading towards the incident scene, in groups of anywhere from 2 to 10 as I was approaching the scene.
And then, like you were inside the house, were there people still there, I assume?
When I arrived on scene, there was probably about 25 persons still on the property that I witnessed. My main focus, obviously, was to the collapse and make sure there was no further incidents that would have come from this. We did access the house with the permission of the owner of the house as well as the tenants. As we went through the house, there were the residents of the house that were there with us. 6 or so people in the house with us at the time that we made the inspection.
How many people appear to be actually living in the house at the time?
Sorry?
8. We believe there to be 8.
And
Based on the visual inspection of the interior of the premises.
And based on the construction of the house and everything, what would be the legal number of people who could live there, unrelated?
Art, what was our question?
This is based on the square footage. It wasn't overcrowded, was it? It might
I
be overcrowded
didn't
as
do
far
an
as...
analysis, but I suspect it was not overcrowded with either town code or New York State property maintenance code. It's a good sized house.
It's just that there are a couple of bedrooms didn't have COs for the conversion.
I'm sorry.
So in other words, a couple of the rooms were converted to bedrooms, but they didn't have the COs.
One room in particular.
One room, yeah.
Any other questions? If not, thank you for attending this briefing. Hopefully we've provided some facts from the town perspective, and the university provided some facts. The one thing, particularly since this is the second time at bat for the homeowner will be given the opportunity of either pleading guilty or not guilty. Not guilty and will go to trial. We are not settling this case.
Agreed.
We're not settling this case. So this case is going to go the distance unless the homeowner wishes to enter a guilty plea. We are definitely going the distance on this, and probably on future prosecutions, unless there's extenuating circumstances, we will not be settling cases. We will be prosecuting cases to the fullest extent that we're allowed. And the message there to landlords, and the problem doesn't lie with students. Students are only looking for housing. Problem lies with landlords who do not want to follow code, who want to make a buck at the expense of the safety of the students. We have an obligation as well as the university, to protect students. Some of the students living in housing around the campus and the community that are not in compliance with our codes are here in this community for the first time, here in this country sometimes for the first time. We have an obligation to protect the safety of the students and the neighborhood, and that's why we enforce codes, not because we want to be party spoiler, anything of that nature. We want to protect the students that are in this community. We care for their safety as everyone else. This was a very dangerous accident in which the people did not exercise due caution, and people were injured. That's regrettable. We don't want to see any additional injuries, and we will enforce our codes. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Do you want to say anything at the end?
Lucas?
Hi.
I heard from Jack that you have those photos for Christmas.